Welcome to Health Hour, a session for you by Black doctors, hosted by the Caribbean and African Health Network. Ever sat in a doctor's office thinking, they just don't get it? Or search for health advice online, but you can't understand it? Felt unheard? You're not alone, and you found your solution with Health Hour. Every Saturday at 11 a.m., this is your space where Caribbean and African healthcare professionals speak about health with a focus on Black people. We tackle the topics that keep you up at night: mental health, chronic conditions, preventive care, sexual health, men's health, women's health, heart disease, and much more. All with the cultural context that matters, because our Black doctors understand the unique challenges we face. Here is what you can expect: real talk from doctors who look like you and get it, lived experience testimonies, practical advice, illness prevention and management tips, and a space of understanding without judgment. You also get to ask questions. Your questions drive the conversation. Health Hour, where community meets Black health expertise.
Hello. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to Health Hour on this beautiful Saturday morning. Really nice to have you all join us today. While we're waiting for everyone to join, I want if everybody could just pop in the chat where they are and what is the weather like where you are. So I'm in London and it's actually quite sunny and crisp with a gentle breeze. Really inviting to pop outside later on today. So how is it where you are? Welcome everybody. Very exciting talk we have coming up today. Okay, so Angie's in London. Someone says it's a little bit chilly. That sounds about right. Cold, wet, and windy Oxfordshire. Okay, all right. Yes, somebody else in London with a fresh winter day. Lovely. Good. Welcome everyone. Yorkshire, and the weather's the same here, but going to venture out later. I am as well. I'm looking forward to it. Nice crisp day. Very nice. Beautiful and crisp in Manchester. Sunny Liverpool. Very nice. Great. Welcome everybody. Huddersfield, Lewisham, weather's okay, a little bit damp. Okay. Nice. Welcome everybody. Really excited to have this talk today, our hormone journey. This is really going to be good for us. Cold Swiss. We've got somebody in Switzerland. Welcome. Thank you for joining. Very nice. Manchester, crispy and warmish. Somebody's lucky. They've got some warmish weather going on. Very nice. Lovely. Welcome everybody. Good. Another minute and we're gonna start. Good. What else have we got here? Somebody's in London and it's raining. Oh, I'm sorry. Hopefully that will stop by the time we're done so that you can venture out as well. Nottingham, not raining. Very nice. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. A couple more entries. Very nice. Good. Welcome. Good. All right. We are at 5 past, so we are going to start. I have the absolute pleasure of introducing Dr. Amy Ivare. She's a consultant obstetrician gynecologist. She works in East Suffolk and North Essex NHS trusts. She manages a range of presentations in gynecology and through pregnancy, and she has a special interest in urogynecology and clinical governance. And today she is going to talk us through our hormonal journey and share all the things. Well, she's going to share things that you need to look out for so that at the end of this, you will have a better understanding of what is happening in your own body and what you may need or not need. Welcome.
Oh, thank you very much for that introduction. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining in. I think I've got everything working there. Wonderful. So, I was tasked to talk about hormones in people who have ovaries, and it's a very wide topic with a lot going on in there. So, I thought I would pick something about my practice that I've noticed, especially about people who look like me, so Afro-Caribbean people in the UK, and how we tend to present or not, especially around issues to do with hormones, but more especially around issues to do with the perimenopause and the menopause and our interaction with hormones and HRT. So, if we talk a little bit about what the usual hormones are that we are interested in, sorry, just remove that. There we go. Um, Talk a little bit about what those hormones are, how they change, how they interact with us, and how we interact with them, how that changes through our lifetime, and especially how that changes towards the menopause, and just a little bit about what HRT risk is, how to understand and interpret it, and how to use that information to get the help that you need. So, when we traditionally talk about female hormones, we talk about these usually estrogen and progesterone, but the other important one is also testosterone. However, they don't work on their own. They work in conjunction with all the other hormones that course through our bodies to help us feel, look, and function as we do. So, if we start with those traditional hormones, they are mainly produced by our ovaries, which are part of our reproductory system or reproductory gland. And they work or are stimulated to work by a gland or in the brain that produces a different set of hormones. And those hormones trigger our ovaries to start producing and growing eggs every cycle, traditionally, that get released. And as those eggs are being recruited and are growing, that's when the estrogen and the progesterone and the testosterone are being produced. The other organ that's really important in producing these hormones is a little gland that sits on top of the kidneys called the adrenal gland. And that's also really important in helping produce these hormones. We also produce a good amount of slightly different, but also estrogen type hormone and slightly different, but also testosterone type hormone from fat cells. And so some of us who have a little bit more of that sort of distribution of fat cells will produce a little bit more of those from there as well. This slide is just to demonstrate how complex the hormonal system actually is. There's lots of other hormones running around, and they all interact with each other to help us function and feel as we do. So, if we talk a little bit more about these hormones in detail, we'll start with estrogen. So, estrogen is the commonest one that we know and that we talk about. Estrogen is really important in helping us regulate a lot of our body systems. So, from growing our hair, from hydrating our skin, so that's what gives us that traditional glow or the female womanly or pregnancy glow that we tend to get. It's really good in helping us regulate our mood, so reduces anxiety, helps us feel, pumped and positive and good about ourselves, helps us sleep properly, works very closely with serotonin to help us rest and sleep well. It helps us regulate our memory and our what's called uh, focus, cognition, helps our brain work properly. It's also really good at protecting our heart and our blood vessels. So it works really closely with some other hormones to help regulate our cholesterol. So we tend to keep more of the good cholesterol than the bad cholesterol, and it helps our blood vessels not get so tightened or spasmy as much. So that helps the blood flow better, that helps the organs get better supply and helps them work better. It's really important in helping us use up our calcium and put it into our bones, so our bones get really strong and healthy. And it's really good at keeping us looking and feeling strong and healthy. The important thing that you will notice throughout this talk is that hormones really need to be in balance. Now, estrogen, like I said, for the most part comes from our ovaries, which also comes from having that regular cycle. Now, anything that disrupts that cycle will disrupt our production of estrogen or keeping that estrogen in balance. Not only does estrogen have to be in balance with itself, it needs to be in balance with all the other hormones as well. So if that gets thrown out of balance, then we get the opposite of what it's trying to achieve. The things that will throw estrogen out of balance or anything that interrupts that cycle. And the commonest things are if, for example, our diets are very highly processed, very full of sort of heavy, stodgy foods or fatty foods, or lots of alcohol, lots of stress in there, not sleeping very well, not exercising very well, or exercising too much, or eating too much, or dieting too much. Any of those changes that disrupts those no normal cycles can disrupt the production of all our hormones, but especially estrogen. And the effects we can get from that are things with difficulty with brain fog, but also controlling our temperature, so getting those hot flashes, um, feeling just like our skin is dry, it's irritable, it's itchy, and that's really noticeable around the vagina, around the bladder. So this dryness, difficulty with sex or painful sex, more likely to get infections, especially bladder infections, and also more likely to get irritable bladder and urine leaks. We're also more likely to get periods go out of sync, so they may become more irregular, more heavy, and also get more sort of PMS type symptoms and mood swings. And if we lose a large amount of estrogen, then our bones sadly cannot keep hold of that calcium as well. So they get thinner and they're more likely to break and get something called osteoporosis. The next hormone we'll talk about is progesterone. That's the other hormone that goes hand in hand with estrogen in that cyclical process. It's also similar to estrogen, really good at helping us function, so brain function, our mood, our sleep, our processing power. It also helps us grow our breast tissue, and really important for fertility. So the spike in estrogen is a good way of knowing that we've ovulated, that we've released an egg that's ready to be fertilized and help us get pregnant. But also, if we don't have high enough levels of progesterone in the early stages of pregnancy, then we may be more likely to suffer with miscarriages early on. Again, similar effects. If those cycles go out of balance, then sadly, our progesterone can also go out of balance, and that can cause problems, especially with the regularity of our periods and how heavy they can be. We can also, some people are also a bit more sensitive to progesterone, so they can get more sort of PMS and bloating type symptoms. They can also suffer with difficulties with breast tenderness, brain fog, maybe feeling a bit more low and depressed in mood, and just fatigue and tiredness, and also difficulty controlling body temperature. And what about testosterone? So we don't traditionally talk about this in people with ovaries, but people with ovaries produce testosterone not as much as people with testes. But testosterone is really important for us. So it's really good at giving us energy that we need. It's really good at helping us keep our bone strength up, to keep our muscle growth and our muscle strength, but also managing our libido. Now, similar thing if our lifestyle goes out of balance, cycles out of balance, especially if we get a bit heavier around the middle, we start producing a bit more of these sort of androgen type, similar to testosterone type hormones, and that can affect all these things. It's if we get too much testosterone, then we can start getting more of a male pattern changes, especially noticeable around hair growth. So we're more likely to get sort of facial hair, we're more likely to get thinning of hair around the middle section as well. Also more likely to develop things like PCOS, that usually goes hand in hand with insulin insensitivity, but also a little bit higher testosterone in there as well. Our moods can change, we can get more acne, and our periods can also become irregular. Very sensitive to sedentary lifestyles and also, as well as diet, excessive alcohol use. Cortisol is another really important hormone. Now, this can get a bad rep. It's called the stress hormone, but we really need it. So peak production is usually sort of early morning because it's driving us, it's giving that drive to get up and go. It helps us stay concentrated, stay focused. And we all need a little bit of that stress response to get things going, to get things done, and to keep our brain engaged in whatever we're doing and to give us that motivation that we need. Its changes throughout the day also help us to regulate, especially our sleep cycle. Now, also really important, works closely with other hormones to help us use up the energy that we take from our food, the sugar that we put in, to transform that into the energy that we need to help us going, to give us energy that we need, keep our blood pressure under control. Now, if our cortisol goes off balance, which again can happen just like the other hormones with changes in diet and changes in exercise, then all of these functions can also be disrupted. The other thing that's really important in keeping cortisol in balance is our sleep hygiene or sleep habits. So if we don't have very good sleep habits or sleep hygiene, then sadly we can get peaks or troughs of cortisol at the wrong times, which then makes us feel like we're either too tired. So we then grab things like coffees or caffeine and fast foods to try and make us feel better, to give us that buzz or that peak in energy that we need. And sadly, that actually feeds a negative cycle. So it actually makes us then have bigger crashes with our blood sugars, with our blood pressures, which then makes us feel worse. And then we do more and more of that. The other thing that can affect cortisol levels is actually, although we're all trying very hard to be healthy, most of us go on some diet or another. Actually, if we're repetitively going on diets, especially crash diets or extreme diets, that can throw our cortisol out of sync, and that actually again pushes us into that negative cycle. And that's why a lot of us, sadly, even with the diets that we're on, don't really achieve the level of health that we're aiming for. If we over exercise, especially when we're doing the extreme sort of cardio and we're not getting enough rest or we're not allowing our body to heal properly, that can also give us too much cortisol, which again pushes us into that negative cortisol stress cycle. And when that happens, we're more likely to actually gain weight, and not only gain weight, but gain it more around the middle section. We're a lot more likely to struggle with just feeling, low when we get those crashes in our blood sugar and also our blood pressure. We're more likely to feel stressed and anxious and then have difficulty sleeping, so difficulty falling asleep or waking up in the middle of the night and just struggling to get back in there or feel rested. And when we struggle with stress, it's not just psychological stress, it's physical stress as well. So when our bodies are stressed, we're more likely to actually suffer injuries in daily life, but also during exercise regimes. And we're more likely to pick up every infection that's going. So that's why if you're feeling stressed or feeling down, that's more likely to happen. And when you do fall ill or pick up an infection, it's harder for you to get rid of it. Okay. Right. Other really important hormone that we all need and use is insulin. Insulin is very good at capturing all the sugar or the glucose that we eat or comes into us through our diet and helping us keep hold of that, protecting our organs from too much sugar and too much glucose, and helping our bodies to transform that sugar into the energy that we need for all our organs to function, but also for us to function in our daily life. If we have a little bit of too much insulin, either because we're producing more because our body's trying to respond to what we're putting into it, um, then we may suffer with different consequences. Subtly, in some people, it might be sort of PCOS type symptoms might be closely associated with this. But over a period of time, our bodies stop responding as they should because they're just used to those high levels, or our bodies aren't producing enough, then we develop basically diabetes. So our bodies can't control the blood sugar as much anymore. And too much sugar, sadly, can damage every organ and every system that we have, including from our brain to our feet, basically, and everything in between. So our nerves, our blood vessels, they can all be negatively affected, as well as our cycles and our fertility. The thyroid gland's really important at helping us manage um, our metabolism, which is really important in how all our organs work. It helps us feel energized and it helps everything function as it should, from our brain to our heart, but also good at helping us keep our hair and our skin healthy. Again, our focus, our attention, and helping us regulate our body temperature. Now, these aren't as affected by what we eat and drink, but for people who have problems with their thyroid gland, then what you eat and drink can affect your hormone levels, especially with the medication that you're taking. But if you have any of these symptoms, then it's worth having a chat with your doctor and maybe getting things tested to make sure that you're not producing too much or too little of your thyroid hormones. So if you have too little thyroid hormones, then you have something called hypothyroidism. And the common signs or symptoms of that is that your body isn't, or your metabolism isn't as high as it should be. So you might suffer things like low energy, just feeling tired, feeling fatigued. The skin goes a bit dry, a bit thin. Your hair goes a bit thin. You might lose your hair. You're more likely to be sensitive to the cold, to suffer with constipation. So things just aren't moving as they should. And the mood tends to be a bit low as well, so tends towards depression. If you produce a bit too much of the thyroid hormones, then you suffer something called hyperthyroidism. So your metabolism is just higher than it should be. So you suffer the opposite. So more anxiety, you might be more wound up, more shaky. Some people get tremors. Some people just feel sweaty. They can't keep weight on. There's weight loss, there's diarrhea. So it's the other extreme of this. And those usually need to be managed with medical treatment. Serotonin is traditionally called the happy hormone, and about 90% of it is produced by the gut. It's really important in boosting our mood, keeping us feeling upbeat and, happy. It's also really important in helping us regulate our rest and our sleep cycles, but also important for our digestive system, keeping our gut health and helping us fight infections or reduce the likelihood of us picking them up, but also it helps our immune system to fight those infections when we do get them. Because most of it's produced by the gut, it's really important to keep that gut health up, to put foods in there that are going to move along, so not the stodgy, fatty, fried stuff that's just going to sit there. Really important to focus on the sort of tryptophan type stuff, so things like eggs and nuts and vegetables that help us produce this more, but also help our gut function better. Probiotics, for example. And all of these work really closely together. So, for example, works closely with things like estrogen and helps us balance that mood as well and our brain function. So how do these change throughout our lives? The hormones that tend to change are the sort of reproductive hormones, the things that are coming from the ovaries, because that changes a lot throughout our life span. So in childhood, not really much at play. In puberty, the brain triggers us to start producing these hormones, but they don't just come in at the right level. They come in at low levels, and you get lots of little spikes as the years go on. So hormones and moods can therefore go sort of up and down in those years. When we get to our reproductive years, so 20s, 30s, things tend to be in balance. And then as we get to our sort of early to mid 40s, that's a perimenopause age. And after that, hormones start dropping to the postmenopause where they as low as they're going to be. This slide is very busy, but in summary, the brain triggers the ovaries to start releasing this, to start growing these eggs, and they start producing these hormones. And that's how we start growing up. So changes to our body shape, we produce hair, breast tissue, and start getting periods. When the periods become a bit more regular, then we get into the traditional menstrual cycle. Not everyone has the exact same, 4-week cycle, but we use the 4-week cycles as the easiest way to just show how things usually work. The importance of the menstrual cycle is just to be aware that in the different phases, there are different hormones working in there, and the way our bodies respond to it changes. So our energy levels will change, the way we look and feel will change. And what's more important, I think, is to be aware of it so that you're able to leverage that in your daily life to be the best that you can be. You don't have to change who you are because of the way things are changing. But if you know how things affect you in different phases, then you might be able to use that differently. So, very quick summary. The first stage, if we start with the menstrual week, which is usually when we're bleeding, we've got the follicle stimulating hormone or FSH that's coming from the brain. What it's doing is recruiting the eggs for the next cycle from the ovaries. In that phase, when you're bleeding, usually most people feel down, they feel tired, they just feel exhausted, a little bit foggy, and just want comfort. They might be a bit more irritable. And then you move into the next week, which is a follicular phase. It just means the eggs are being recruited. And when the eggs start being recruited and growing, that's when your estrogen levels are going up. So they're producing a lot of that estrogen. And in that phase, people tend to feel a bit more positive. Their focus is coming back, their brain power is coming back, the energy is coming back, their skin glow is coming back, and that's changing. And those sort of cravings for the comfort stuff or comfort foods is slowly passing. The week after is the week of ovulation. So estrogen is at its peak. That's when the biggest egg is actually released. So that's the peak week of fertility. So people tend to be a bit more outgoing, a bit more confident, and libido tends to be at its highest as well. The week after that, there's a decline in estrogen and a peak in progesterone, and people who are sensitive might get a bit more sort of PMS type symptoms. People get a bit more sort of comforty, they just want a bit more. So the cravings start coming back then as well. Breasts might get a bit more engorged, a bit more tender as well in that phase, and then repeat. All these hormones change significantly during pregnancy. From week to week, everything changes. So in the early pregnancy, you get a spike in progesterone that's helping to support that early pregnancy until the pregnancy starts producing its own hormones. The pregnancy hormone, HCG, starts going up as well. So the body changes significantly in that first phase. So everything's very sensitive, breast tissue is growing, it's very sensitive, sense of smell is peak. The feeling of nausea and vomiting comes in as well. As the pregnancy progresses, we produce a bit more estrogen, so hair gets thicker, skin gets fuller, more glowy, more shiny, and we start collecting a bit more fluid as well, retaining fluid. Cortisol increases as you go on, so we start getting a bit more difficulty with sleep, and you start producing other hormones like relaxin, which makes your joints a bit more relaxed, which is great for the growing pregnancy, which is great for preparing you to have that baby. But what it means is that because your joints are not as tightly held together anymore, they become a bit more achy, a bit more loose, a bit more clicky, and you get a bit more of that sort of back pain, hip pain, and just difficulty getting comfortable or moving around. After the baby's born, there's a significant drop in a lot of those hormones. So there's a lot of sort of mood effects, mental effects, concentration effects, sleep effects. So the skin gets thinner again, the hair might shed, and for some people that can be quite significant. As well as having a new baby, which gets you tired, there's a massive change in those hormones, which also mean that you're a bit more wound up, but also a bit more tired, and the mood can change as well significantly. You also get a rise in hormones like prolactin and oxytocin, which are great at helping you bond with the baby, but also helps your body prepare to feed and look after that baby, so produce breast milk, for example. So in summary, things change significantly throughout the years, and we're going to focus a bit more on this other end of time, which is sort of mid 40s and 50s, perimenopause and the menopause. The important thing to note in the Afro-Caribbean community is that our symptoms might actually start a little bit sooner, and actually for a lot of us, they might be a bit more intense, especially with hot flashes. But we're actually less likely to seek medical help and to seek support with that hormone function or help with things like HRT. it's important to note that everybody's experience of the menopause will be very different. Yes, it tends to be a genetic, so age-wise, when things start, tend to be similar to when things start for if you've got mothers or sisters. However, everyone feels things very differently, and everyone's life is affected very differently. But a common thing is a large number of people are affected. So our careers are affected, our sex life is affected, our families are affected, our partners are affected, our social lives are affected. So it can be a big change, an important change. This slide is very busy, but it just shows you how much changes just in the hormones I have talked about. There are lots of other hormones and they all change as well, but we'll talk about these in a bit more detail and just shows you how things change. So estrogen, for example, has the biggest, most noticeable drop or decline with the menopause. And that's what causes sort of the hot flashes, the night sweats, the vaginal dryness, the joint pain, the skin thinning, the hair loss, the bone thinning, the bone loss, and causes other medical problems like being more likely to break your bones or being more likely to suffer with brain issues or heart issues or raised blood pressure. The mood also changes. People suffer a lot with brain fog, memory lapses, increase in anxiety and depression as well. Progesterone actually starts dropping a little bit earlier, so that's why a lot of people suffer with periods going out of sync a little bit just before they go through the menopause. So periods can get heavier, they can be more spaced out, or they can be just all over the place. People can suffer a lot with brain fog again, mood instability, stress sensitivity, difficulty sleeping, anxiety. The way your body responds to insulin changes, so it's less likely to respond as quickly or as sensitively as it did before. And the result of that is you're more likely to have slightly higher levels of blood sugar, more likely to keep hold of fat tissue, especially around the middle section. So that's why there's that change in distribution, along with a change in estrogen, but a change in insulin resistance as well. So again, puts us at higher risk of things like diabetes, of things like high blood pressure and the consequence of those changes. The way our thyroid changes, so our sensitivity to those hormones change, so our metabolism as a whole tends to slow down. So that's why if you used to be on diets before and you suddenly change, or you used to take up exercise regimes and your body changes, you may not see those changes as quickly as you used to do. You might feel a bit more tired, you might feel more sensitive to the cold, your hair might be thinning a bit more, your skin might be changing as well. And these all work in close conjunction with estrogen. So all those changes can just be the menopause or can be changes in these hormones as well, or can be both working together. The way we respond to stress changes, so our cortisol levels can change and our sensitivity to the cortisol hormones can change as well. So we're a bit more sensitive to stress, so that's psychological as well as physical, as well as medical stresses. So the way our body gets injured, it's, a bit more sensitive, but also recovery takes a bit longer. The way, again, we regulate our serotonin, again, in close conjunction with the changes in estrogen changes. So our moods change, we're more likely to feel down, excuse me, sleep disturbances, and emotional instability as well. So this is a slide that just summarizes all those changes. And as you can see, it affects every single system of the body. So what are the specific health effects? So if we're not just talking about symptoms of hot flashes or skin changes or hair thinning. Because of the changes in estrogen, which, like I said before, is very good at stopping the blood vessels from contracting too much, it also usually helps us to lay down more good than bad cholesterol. In the absence of that, we get the opposite. So we're more likely then to have these negative changes in the blood vessels, which mean that we're more likely to lay down a bit more cholesterol where we don't really want it to be, and our blood vessels get a bit stiffer, so we're more likely to get raised blood pressure, and we're also more likely to get things like strokes and heart disease. As mentioned, more likely to get raised blood pressure because of those changes in how the blood vessels relax and how they contract as well. And sadly, because of that, we're at higher risk of getting things like kidney disease, heart failure, heart attacks, or strokes. The brain is very sensitive to blood flow and, restriction of blood flow around. So sadly, that puts us a higher risk of getting things like strokes. And with strokes or even the changes in the aging process of the brain, we're more likely to get things like Alzheimer's and dementia. And because of the higher risk of raised blood pressure, of diabetes, of chronic inflammation, which the kidneys are very sensitive to, we are more likely to develop kidney disease. And sadly, this is higher in the Afro-Caribbean population. As mentioned before, estrogen is really important in keeping our bone health. So the heavier or the thicker our bones are, the less likely they are to break. But when we have that sudden drop in estrogen, then the bones start thinning with time. And as we get older, we're more likely to get these breaks. Now, if we break a bone when we're younger, tends to recover quickly, tends to get back to normal quickly. However, the older we are, a break might mean a complete change to our lives as we know it. And for some people, that can be life-threatening. So really important to protect those bones as we age, even though it doesn't look like the most obvious thing when health is concerned. This is more important in people with darker skin tones, so Afro-Caribbean populations, because when we live in the northern hemisphere, we don't have enough sun, and because we have a bit more color or the hormone um, that protects the sun rays from going through, so we don't use up as much of that sun to keep hold of that calcium in our bones and make them stronger and healthier. So it's really important to be on the vitamin D supplements way before we get into the menopause, so we're optimizing our bone health before we start losing those hormones and those and that bone starts thinning. Because of all these changes and the changes in the way the hormones interact with themselves and with cortisol, we're more likely to deposit fat around our middle section. And sadly, that triggers that negative cycle where we get less sensitivity to insulin, we get more response to cortisol, and we deposit a bit more of that fat around the middle. If our diets are already heavier, on the starchy side or the fatty side, then again, we're more likely to make this process go forward or to compound this negative cycle. So this is a summary slide just demonstrating all those changes, and again, it affects every bodily function. The other thing that we haven't spoken as much about is sexual function. So in the menopause, the drop in testosterone, drop in estrogen makes us less likely to want to be sexually active, but also the changes in the skin. So because our skin is less hydrated, the vagina is very sensitive to this. So sex tends to be more painful, hence we tend to avoid it. But also the changes in the hormone levels also mean that the bugs that usually live in the vaginal skin, we all have those, also change, which means that we're more likely to get infections, and especially infections in the bladder. But also the bladder gets a bit more irritable, so we're more likely to suffer with urine leaks, which changes the way we feel about ourselves, our self-confidence, and sexual function and desire. So how do we manage things? Now, everyone should be optimizing health. Like I've mentioned before, we want that balance. So we want to aim towards the healthy diet, and we want to pick a healthy diet that works for us and keep going with it. We want to avoid the yo-yoing diets. We want to avoid the yo-yoing exercises. We want to pick, low or moderate intensity cardio, but more importantly, strength training that will increase our muscle mass, that will increase our bone strength, and that will help us optimize our health as we go into the menopause. Avoiding or managing stress is really important as well, because psychologically that triggers some of those changes, especially to do with serotonin and cortisol, which also interacts with our other hormones and changes how we feel, but also how our body expresses itself in our periods, but also in our levels of energy, our fatigue, our sleep, etc. And that feeds into that cycle again. There are lots of different things we can do, including exercise, stress reduction, healthy diet, sleep hygiene. So if we already have habits of going to sleep at the right time, of avoiding things that interfere with our sleep, so watching TV into the night, playing with our phones, drinking a lot of alcohol before bed, other stimulants. So that's caffeine, that's smoking, exciting things, especially around bedtime. If we're already in the habit of avoiding those, then as we go through the menopause, that will put us in a better stead, in a better place to be able to manage those changes. There are things like herbal teas and supplements that also have some evidence at helping with some of those symptoms. However, the only real treatment for the changes that have happened to our bodies, especially with regards to protecting our bone health, is to replace some of that hormone. So that's hormone replacement therapy or HRT. Now, there are lots of different ways of delivering HRT, as you can see in this slide. There's so many now. There's a lot of talk about risk of HRT. What I will say is that in balance, there has been lots of studies involving millions of women, and overall HRT is very safe. We are giving small amounts of hormone replacement compared to what your body would have been making to keep you functioning, to help you function as best as you can on a daily basis to keep your life going, but also to improve some of your health outcomes. That's not to say that everyone should or must have HRT. It is a natural process, and you can choose not to go through that. But also, for a small number of people, HRT can actually increase their risk of other negative health outcomes. So it's really important to talk to your doctor about what works best for you. Now, the main hormone we're trying to replace with HRT is the estrogen, because that's what controls or manages a lot of the symptoms that we have and also protects our bone health. However, if we have a womb or a uterus and we only take estrogen replacement, then what happens is we grow the lining of the womb like you would have done when you had periods, but we grow it without control. So there's nothing giving us that cycle anymore. So it's really important to have progesterone in there as well, because if we don't do that, then that growth can go out of sync and actually can develop into cancer over time. So to prevent the risk of cancer in the womb, if you have a womb and you're taking HRT, so estrogen, you must take progesterone with it. And there are lots of different ways of doing that. You can also replace testosterone if it's needed, and that again is a conversation to be had with your doctor. Now, having the progesterone does change risk profiles. We'll touch a little bit about that, but it's probably more important to talk to your doctor about your specific risk. And this is just a bit more of a wordy slide that just says all of that again. Some people's risk of blood clots will be increased, but that again can be changed depending on the type of HRT you have and how it is given. So if you have tablet HRTs, for example, the risk is higher than if you have patch HRTs. Okay. This slide is really good. Again, these numbers might not be completely accurate, but this is a very good slide at demonstrating how different risk can be for different people. So the first line, if we argue that there are 23 cases of breast cancer diagnosed in the UK, if you give everyone HRT, so combine HRT, estrogen, and progesterone, you will increase that number by 4. So 4 extra people will get breast cancer. However, if you remove the progesterone part of that HRT, you actually get less people diagnosed with that breast cancer. So those people's risk factors have changed just by changing part of that hormone in there. So really important to have a chat about what that means for you. Now, the slide on the combined pill is probably similar in risk profile because you're giving the estrogen and the progesterone as well. However, if you look at our other habits, so if those people are drinking alcohol as well, so high levels of alcohol intake, then you increase the risk of breast cancer again. So again, you would get 5 extra people who would develop breast cancer, and that's just because of their use of alcohol. If people were smoking, you would get 3 extra people having breast cancer. So again, their risk or their chance of breast cancer has gone up because of different lifestyle factors. If people are overweight, so BMI is over 30, then you double the chance. So you get 24 extra people getting breast cancer because of the associated risk factor. However, if people exercise regularly, moderate exercise, then that risk reduces. So you get 7 fewer people getting cancer. So our communities are lovely, we're close-knit, we're very good at saying, I saw that person experience that and being affected by those experiences. But it's really important not to presume that your chances or your outcomes are the same as anybody else's, because they're not. All our lives are different, all our risk factors are different. So it's really important to have that personalized conversation and to make those decisions based on what's going on for you. There is a lot of data out there about the outcomes of HRT, different types of HRT, using HRT at different ages. So whether you start HRT just as you get into the menopause or you start HRT 20 years later, the risk profiles are very different. And there's lots of data out there that your doctor can use to have those conversations with you. So these are just a couple of examples that I have taken from a national guideline just to demonstrate some of that. So for example, when we talk about breast cancer, when you have people taking the estrogen and progesterone, which is called combined HRT, you can compare the risk of or the chance of getting breast cancer. The orange bit here is people who have never taken HRT. The green bit, they've taken it for 5 years. The blue bit, they've taken it for 10 years. On the left-hand side, you've got people who've taken it later on, so usually closer to 50 they've started. On the right-hand side, people have started it earlier, so about 40s. As you can see, your chances of getting breast cancer increase with age. So on the right-hand side, if you've never taken it in your 40s to 60s, your chances are 33 out of 1,000. Whereas on the left-hand side, your chance is 59 out of 1,000 people. If you take HRT for 10 years and you started earlier, on the right-hand side, those numbers go from 33 to 51 out of 1,000. On the left-hand side goes from 59 or almost 60 to 90 or 92 out of 1,000. So the chance goes up, but it goes up anyway as we get older. This is just another way of demonstrating the exact same thing. So those bars are 1,000 people, and at the bottom of the bar where it's highlighted is a number of people that actually get the problem, so breast cancer in this case. And again, this is people taking the estrogen and progesterone together. On the right-hand side, they're taking it younger. On the left-hand side, they're taking it older. And as you can see, as they get older, those numbers of the colored parts of the bar are getting higher and higher because our chances get higher anyway as we get older. But you can see there is a step up in those highlighted numbers based on how long you've taken that combined HRT. So if we look at this part here, age 50 to 69, you can see the orange looking bars, people who've never taken HRT. The highlighted is a number out of 1,000 who get breast cancer. The green bar is people who've taken it for 5 years. The blue bars, people who've taken it for 10 years. So as you can see, there is a clear step up the longer you're taking that combined HRT for. However, if you look over here in the age 40 to 44, people who've never taken versus people who've taken for 10 years, actually there isn't much of a step up in those early years, but there is more of a step up if you look at the 40 to 59 age range. This is exactly the same figure, but the numbers are different for people who are taking estrogen only breast HRT and their chances that they develop breast cancer. So again, the background numbers are the same because we're looking at the same population. 59 out of 1,000 people who've never taken HRT develop it. If you're looking in the age 50 to 69 age group, 40 to 59 age group, the number's 33. And those numbers go up in the younger age group to 41 and the older age group after 10 years to 71 instead of I think it was 90 with the previous group who were taking both estrogen and progesterone. And again, that's just another view, it's just a colored looking graph. But in this graph, I hope you can appreciate compared to the previous graph, there's less of a step up in that risk or in that chance or in those numbers. So those numbers seem closer together in this group than they were in the previous group who were taking both estrogen and progesterone. So in the group that just takes estrogen, the chance is a little bit lower, even though they still go up. When you're looking at cancers of the womb, again, the longer you take that HRT, the slightly higher the chances. The numbers are still relatively small. We're talking 4 out of 1,000 people will get the cancer anyway, and that number goes up to 8 out of 1,000 if they've taken it for sort of 10 plus years. In the 5-year group, it seems to be much smaller, but when you're talking about things like research, you want really big numbers to be able to see a difference. And it's hard to see a difference when you've only got small numbers or small changes. So it's hard to say which way it goes, but definitely you do not want to take estrogen without progesterone because you're way more likely to get a cancer of the lining of the womb. If you've got a womb, if you don't have a womb, then you don't need progesterone and you can manage your risk profile better. With ovarian cancer, again, those numbers are very small. It looks like you've gone from 100,000 to 200,000, but that's such a small change. It's hard to see if that's actually very significant when we're talking about decisions in medicine. With dementia, this is a bit of a tricky slide because we're just looking at people who started HRT later on. So they've started it after about 15, 20 years of being in the menopause. So their risks will be higher anyway. And there is some suspicion if you start HRT later on, then you might change your risk profile quicker than if you started HRT earlier on. So those numbers do go up from 9 in 1,000 people to 18 in 1,000 people. And the increase is similar if you're talking about combined HRT, so that estrogen and progesterone versus estrogen alone. With heart disease, again, those numbers are very similar. So there's not much of a difference between people who take HRT and don't take HRT when it comes to heart disease. Osteoporosis, there's a significant drop in the number of people who suffer breaks because their bones have thinned if they take HRT compared to people who do not take HRT. So if we look at this slide on the top left, for example, between the ages of 50 and 54, the chances of that happening is 60 out of 1,000 people who've never taken HRT. If you take HRT, the numbers go down significantly to 40 out of 1,000 people taking HRT for 5 years. If you take HRT for 10 years, then that number goes down from 127 to 80. So in all the groups, the number is going down if you're taking HRT. So HRT protects your bones. The risk of stroke doesn't really change significantly whether you take HRT or not, whether you take combined HRT or not. So actually taking HRT does not make you more likely to get a stroke. And there's lots of data and information as well as guidelines and patient information out there on this. I know that's been very quick and a whistle-stop tour, but I hope that's been helpful and hopefully triggered some conversation.
Amazing. Many thanks. That was a really, really good session. As you can see, very much appreciated by our attendees. And we've got lots of questions. So I'm going to jump straight into the questions. The
Good.
first question is about early menopause. Someone has had an early menopause and they're not on HRT. They are having symptoms, hot flushes, brain fog, and they're worried, is it too late to start HRT? Should they be on HRT?
So the advice is if you start if you start your menopause early, especially in your 30s or 40s, you really should be taking HRT. I would definitely recommend taking HRT because our natural lifespan is to go to about, on average in the UK, to about early 50s. So 51 is usually where we aim for. Now, if you get to the menopause a couple of years before that and you don't want to take it, that's fine. But early menopause, early 40s, 30s, please be on HRT because your body needs those hormones. And sadly, your aging process will start sooner if you don't have those hormones working as they should be doing in your system until you get to that sort of early 50s. So yes, I would recommend HRT if you're not on it and you started menopause early.
Thank you very much. So pertinent. Our next question is someone who says they are not enjoying their menopause at all. They've got bloating, water retention, wind, hot flushes, but they're refusing HRT due to fear of the side effects. What are her options?
I think what I would say is you need to sit down with someone. And I think even before that, what I would do is write down what you're afraid of. So be clear in yourself what exactly are the side effects that you're scared of. So, like I've said, there's lots of research that has been done on people taking HRT, and more people get benefit than risk from HRT. I know that's very hard for me to reassure you, just giving you generic stuff. But what I find really helpful talking to people is people who come with very specific, look, my mum suffered with this, or I had a sister who got cancer after 10 years of this, or I had this. Whatever it is, it's not silly. Write it down and bring it to an appointment and say, look, doc, I want this treated, but I'm afraid of this. And that helps your doctor way better to know how to help you. Because actually for some people you might be right. There might be something that runs in the family that needs to be investigated. And actually, if we can find out what it is, if we can manage your risk profile, we can actually help you achieve the treatments for the stuff that's bothering you. For some people, that may not be HRT because, like I say, HRT isn't for everyone. But even if it isn't, we can help you find the supplements or the alternatives or the right things that will help you feel better. In general, I would say for things like the bloating or the keeping of weight around the middle, an exercise regime is really important. We need to be getting up, we need to be getting out, we need to be building that into our lifestyle. I know it's hard because it's usually the age at which lots of us have got teenage children, we've got busy jobs, we need to be there, we need to be in 10 different places, but it's really important to put yourself first and to make sure that you've got those habits going, those healthy diets, the getting up and getting out exercise. You need to be strength training. You need to be putting in a bit of cardio in there on a regular basis. That alone will help you feeling a bit better. But if you want HRT and are afraid, or you want a little bit more because those things have not quite done it and are afraid, please write down what it is that's bothering you and take it with you. And we can talk about the specific concerns. We can look at data together. We can look at your family together. We can look at your lifestyle together and come to a solution that will help you.
That is such fantastic advice. Thank you. Writing it down,
Mhm.
before you go into that office and you're in front of your doctor, and then you may not quite be able to articulate or remember what it was you
Absolutely.
wanted to discuss. So
Mhm.
writing it down is such fantastic advice.
Mm.
Our next person, they are on testosterone gel, but they struggle to remember to take it. They avoid mornings because they moisturize. And they're asking, can they take it in the evening instead?
What I would say is try it and see what it does. Yeah, a lot of these have got advice on timings, but actually, as you found out, it doesn't necessarily work for your lifestyle. So if it doesn't work for your lifestyle, there's nothing absolute saying you can't take it at a different time. What I would do is try it for a couple of weeks and see if you remember better. Maybe even write down a diary of how you're feeling compared to when you took it in the mornings and see if that works better for you. And if it does, absolutely go for it.
Great, great. Thank you. Flexibility. We like
Mhm.
that. Okay, so someone here, they've had a hysterectomy, but they've kept their ovaries.
Mhm.
They are struggling with body pain and they are on HRT, but they're getting significant pain. So they get pain in the first week, and then around the 20th of the month. Is there any advice about the body pains?
Hmm.
Yeah.
What I would say is, have you seen a doctor about the body pains? Because there are lots of symptoms like this that are to do with the menopause, but there are also lots of symptoms that can overlap. They're nothing to do with the menopause. So it's really important to see someone to investigate that first before you put it down to the hormones and menopause. It also depends on how old you are. So if you're sort of in your 30s or early 40s, you will still have some kind of cycle going. So yes, it would make sense to feel different in different parts of the cycle. And sometimes managing HRT in different ways can make you feel differently, if that makes sense. So my first step would be to investigate other causes of that pain, make sure it's nothing to do with that, and then look at ways in which you can change your HRT. So can you take different numbers of pumps or different level numbers of applications at different times to make you feel better? So that's how I would approach that.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Uh,
Oh, and also, sorry, if you are exercising, this is also something I see very commonly. Are you giving yourself enough rest time? So, like I said, the cycle changes, mean your body's sensitive to different things at different times. So, try and regulate your exercise and your rest. So, for example, if you're into cardio one week, maybe in the more sensitive weeks, can you try something like Pilates or yoga more than the runs or the sprints or strength training or heavy lifting. So try and change that as well and see if that makes a difference.
okay, great. Thank you. We now have someone who has a medically induced menopause due to endometriosis. And we have pointed out that we do have an endometriosis session coming up in March. But the question here is they're having all these symptoms, even things like flaky scalp, constipation, the brain fog, the irritability. Is this normal and is there anything that can help?
It can be normal. So sadly, if we lose the ovaries, especially if we lose them early, then the menopause symptoms do come on and they can be really difficult. The severity of the endometriosis will affect how much or how ready you are or your doctor is to start HRT. But for almost everyone who's suffered that, so whose ovaries have been removed and is suffering side effects, I haven't yet met someone who's been absolutely unable to take HRT. Some kind of HRT will be helpful, and my advice would be to try it and see what effects it has. There's a small chance it will trigger endometriosis deposits, especially if you've got severe deposits which are there and have been causing problems before. But it's all a balance. So you're trying to look at what am I trying to gain and what am I ready to risk or to chance to get the effect that I want to get. And actually, the symptoms you're suffering right now are probably more intense than the symptoms you may suffer, if that makes sense. So that's how I encourage people to think about it.
Great, thank you. It is challenging when
It is.
um, you know, inducing the menopause to help the endometriosis, but then getting side effects and need something to help with the side effects and just
Mhm.
trying to find that
The
balance
right balance. Yeah.
between the pain and the symptoms of the endometriosis and the symptoms of the menopausal symptoms. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
I think, sorry, just to say the other thing that's helpful as well to remember is that HRT, especially if you're not taking it in a cyclical pattern, isn't feeding the endometriosis in the same cyclical pattern that your body would have been doing. So that's also different. And because of that, you don't get quite the same reactivation that you would have got with your ovaries. And it's not giving you the same amount of hormones that your body used to give you. So it's a smaller amount, it's not in a cyclical pattern. So that's why people tend to tolerate it better than having their ovaries in place.
Great.
Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you. No, that's all right. We've gone past 12. We're gonna just do 10 more minutes of
Yeah. Yeah.
questions, if all right with you. Brilliant. Okay. So, what next question is about reduction in libido. Someone is asking, does reduction in libido ever change? Theirs has been significantly reduced over the past 5 years, and she's 63 years old now. So any advice about, or, will that change? Will that improve? Or any suggestions for improving that?
That's really hard to predict. So a lot of my clinic deals with people who suffer with prolapse and incontinence. So I do look after much older people. And actually, I do have people in their 70s who have a sudden, increase in sexual function, libido. And I haven't quite yet figured out what it is that causes that. It might be a change of life factors for some people. So retirement tends to do that for some people. They're suddenly looking after themselves more, they're putting themselves first. People suddenly being able to explore the world, people suddenly being able to find new partners or different partners, or just the change in the relationship dynamics because suddenly they've got more time for themselves or they've got a bit more money to spend, a bit less stress. All of that affects sexual function and libido as well. So, as well as getting that drop in hormone, sadly, is a time in life where we're really busy, like I've said before, we're really stressed. Our finances are being stretched everywhere. We're trying to help ourselves, trying to help our children, trying to just keep going with work. So, yes, sometimes when some of those stresses drop away, people do feel better about themselves. They get a bit more confidence, they're more accepting of themselves. And that in turn feeds into the increase in sexual function and libido. I think maybe exploring sort of relationship factors, stresses around the home, stresses around work for both partners sometimes might help as well. And being more open in those conversations can also help. But for people who've done all of that, like I said, there's also the option, if you're open to things like HRT, discussing with your doctor what the pros and cons of trying a bit of testosterone are as well. That can be helpful.
Great. Thank you very much. Now we've got someone, she has said, I have just turned 35.
Mhm.
How do I keep an eye on my hormone levels? Where to start with things like cholesterol, serotonin, progesterone? I feel my body's changing, newfound acne, newfound fibroids, and I want to support my body in this transition.
Hmm. So in our current healthcare setup, there isn't a way of keeping a check on your hormones. So you can't just go and keep testing your hormones. There are companies who do that privately, but I'm not necessarily sure how helpful that is because, as I've demonstrated, our hormones change. They change on a cyclical basis, they change through as we age. I think the more important thing is just to keep an eye on what you're feeling week on week, but also month on month and year on year. So if you're feeling a bit more tired, what's changed in life? Are you under a bit more pressure? Has your diet changed? Has your exercise regime changed? Have your responsibilities changed? Is there anything you can do to mitigate any of that? Is there anything you can do to claw a bit more time back for you? So are you spending a bit more time on yourself? Are you spending a bit more time on your quiet time, your quiet space, your meditation, your exercise? So can you take a walking to work, for example, where you're in your own space, before you get there? Does that make you feel better in yourself? Can you, I don't know, change up what you're wearing, a bit more color, a bit more, you know, loudness, a bit more taking presence in the room? Would that make you feel a bit more better, a bit more energetic? And actually keeping track of hormones. If you're getting regular cycles, then your ovaries are working and your hormones are being produced on a regular basis. Maybe the thing to keep track of is how the rest of life is affecting you and how you're able to affect that in turn, if that makes sense. So
Great.
in summary, there's no way of testing it in our current health system, and I'm not sure that testing your serotonin on a monthly basis will make a difference, but it's more being aware that the things you're doing would give you a surge of certain hormones more than other hormones, and there are things you can do to change that up.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I think it's great to be looking at your health
Yeah.
and assessing how you want to transition for the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So
Mhm.
it's good to be aware um, while still not getting too medicalized. So I do like that advice. Someone has asked, what is the best HRT option for someone with migraines with aura and hypersensitive to progesterone?
Goodness.
Yeah.
That's a difficult one because sadly, estrogen with people who have migraines with aura is more likely to cause complications, especially when it with the risk of blood clots. So it depends on what you're struggling with. So, for example, if your most of your symptoms are sort of vaginally related, then I would ditch the systemic HRT together. I wouldn't take any tablets or patches or anything like that, and I just go for vaginal HRT. That's quite safe, because it doesn't get absorbed into the system like the other HRT does. So even when you've got really tricky to manage risk factors, there are ways in which you can look at it. So you can look at, okay, what exactly am I trying to treat? And are there other ways of dealing with it? If you've got systemic symptoms, if it's the brain fog and the hot flushes and night sweats, that's harder to manage with HRT. And I just need to be honest with that. That might be more focused on lifestyle factors. And there are other types of medicines that can be tried to see if they can take away the systemic symptoms that have got nothing to do with hormone replacement.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, I think, we keep trying to
Mm.
think there's talk about some new drugs that are
Mhm.
non-hormonal that may be able to help with the hot flushes and so forth. So lots of things out there. And that leads really nicely into our last question, which is what additional supplements are good for bone density and muscle mass? For example, protein, creatinine, that sort of stuff.
So in general, if you have a good diet, a diet that's based on protein, that's balanced with seafoods, got enough oil, not too much, got enough starch, not too much. You don't need to be drinking liters of creatinine. Your body's making it and it's looking after it. The supplements you need are vitamin D because we don't get enough of it. As we get older, especially when lives get busier, we get into diets, we get into, restricting calories because we're trying to keep healthy and look a certain way. If you're restricting a lot, then you need to be adding supplements, especially if you're on the modern weight loss injections. Those really restrict your diet and your calorie intake. Really important to be on dietary supplements as well. So the generic Well Women supplements over the counter cover most things that you need. So that's your B vitamins, your vitamin D, your calciums, your vitamin D, things like zinc, selenium. Those are really helpful for your repair process as well, your skin, your nails, your hair, your bone. But vitamin D is the biggest one. If you've got a good diet, you've got calcium in there, you want vitamin D to help you transform it and use it properly. Our skin's darker, we're not going to use the sun, we're not going to absorb and use the sun in the northern hemisphere like people with lighter skin tones. So we need that vitamin D, especially if we've got a restrictive diet, because we're trying to be healthy, and especially if we're using those weight loss aids as well.
Fantastic. That was a great end to a wonderful session. Thank you very much, Dr. Ivare. And
No,
I'm going
thank
to
you all.
hand over to Stephanie to close the session. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Ivare, for this amazing and informative discussion on menopause and HRTs. Thank you so much. And thank you to Natalie for hosting this amazing, session. And thanks to our participant as well for, contributing and asking all the relevant questions. It's been a pleasure having all of you today. So I'll just put on my slides. Um, let's go. Can you all see my slide okay?
Yes, it's not in presentation mode, but we can see it.
Right. Okay, so our next health hour will return next week, and it's going to be the same amazing benefit from our Black professionals and clinicians. So next week topic is going to be on hypertension, which is we all know is the biggest silent killer in the Black community. And it's going to be next Saturday, same time, so from 11 till 1:15. So please, if you want to register, you can send an email to info@can.org.uk. So again, we are back with our Black Healthcare Award, which is one of our, flagship events here in London to recognize the exceptional Black health clinicians doing amazing work in our community. So please join us in celebrating this excellent innovation in healthcare. The nomination is open. If you know any Black professional or clinician who's doing amazing work that needs to be recognized, please, you can send an email to, Black Healthcare Awards, or you can nominate them. The nomination form is online on www.blackhealthcareaward.org.uk. Please nominate them. They need to be appreciated for the work they're doing. And it's going to be on the 4th of July. So nomination is open from now till, July. So please make sure you nominate them. So we are back again. It's time for Remembrance 2016 COVID-19 Reflection Day. Come together in hope. We've lost a lot of loved ones during COVID, and it's a time for us to, remember them. So National Service for the Black Community is going to take place on the 18th of March from 7 to 9 p.m. It's going to take place at the Manchester Monastery, and you can send an email to event@can. And we have our amazing speakers. You can see them on my screen. We have Pastor Joseph Ofuma, Dr. Jackie McLeod, Bishop Mackenzie, and a lot of amazing, speakers on the day. Please come and celebrate, and also not celebrate, come and, join us to remember them. So International Women's Day, I'm so happy that today is even a topic on women's health, and the next month is going to be a Women's Month. So we're celebrating International Women's Day on the 12th of March, and it's free entry. You can also send more inquiries at event@can.org.uk. And This year, Health is Wealth, advancing the physical and mental emotional well-being of Black women, which is really, really important. And it's a cultural healing and celebration. It's taking place, like I said, on the 12th of March from 6 till 8:30. So please join us on the 12th of March. So festive period has passed, but we always are there to support the Black community. So book a free confidential income maximization. You can find out about this at saferhome@can.org.uk. So Black Health Legacy, I know we've heard about the Black Health Legacy research, and if you want to be part of this research, we want to change the history for Black, African, and Caribbean people in the UK when it comes to health. So too many of us face unfair health challenges. It's time to fix that now. So please make sure you participate in the survey about Black Health Legacy. You can also send an email at research@can.org.uk to be part of the research. It's online. It's going to be just between 15 and 20 minutes. We need to hear your voices to drive this research. So thank you all, like I said, for joining us today, and we hope to see you again next week. So thank you. Bye. I'll hand over back to Sam.
And that's our time for today. Whether you joined us on Zoom, Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, thank you for making the Health Hour part of your Saturday. We hope today's session gave you the right dose of health wisdom that you can share with your friends and family. When we share knowledge, we strengthen our entire community. Mark your calendar. Next Saturday, same time. Got a topic in mind? We want to hear from you at health@can.org.uk. Health Hour, hosted by the Caribbean and African Health Network.